Hey guys, in this lecture we'll be discussing debugging and why it is important for JavaScript. It is easy to get lost writing JavaScript code without a debugger. So what we have seen in the past is that we get issues, we have to triage issues, and even in the error lecture we saw different errors possible. But those were errors. What if there was a logical problem? How do you debug? Because your code base will start growing. It is very difficult to write JavaScript code without a debugger. Your code might contain syntax errors or logical errors that are difficult to diagnose. Often when JavaScript code contains errors, nothing will happen. There are no error messages and you will get no indication where to search for errors. Normally errors will happen. Every time you try to write some new JavaScript code, error will happen. Now what are JavaScript debuggers? So searching for errors in programming code is called debugging. So when you search for a error in a code, it's called debugging. Now debugging is not easy, but fortunately all modern browsers have a built-in debugger. Built-in debuggers can be turned on or off, forcing errors to be reported to the user. With a debugger, you can also set breakpoints and examine variables while the code is executing. So the first thing that we can use for debugging is definitely the console.log that you can see. So let me just close the output and open the console and just run it. You can see if you want to log something or a value or a variable, you can definitely put it onto console log and you can check it out. That's the best and the simplest. But how many console logs will you put? And that's where comes the concept of putting a breakpoint. So in a debugger window, you can set breakpoints. And at each breakpoint, JavaScript will stop executing and you can examine. To variable x is equals to 15, variable y is equals to 5, variable z is equals to x into y. And then let's try to add a p tag. And here we will add a keyword called debugger. What this will do is this will just stop the flow of JavaScript execution and you can see where you are. And once you are stopped, the next step you'll do is get element by ID update example with the inner HTML is equals to z. So you can see the answer. Let me just comment this out. Let me close the console, open the output, and now run JS 75. Okay, now the debugger is commented. Now let me just turn this debugger on, and if you run the JS, even nothing will happen, no execution will be stopped. But when you open the console, so the way you open it is either you do right click and say inspect on your browser or press an F12 for Windows user. Once you open the console, now when you run this JS, it will stop. You see, paused in debugger, and there's a play button and there's a next step button. What this next step button does is it will let you go to the next step over to the next function, which means the next line. It will run this one and then it will run this one. Just before we move on, there is a lot of information on the left hand side that you can see. Again, it might appear differently in your browser depending on what you're seeing. So there are different threads. If you're debugging the threads, if you want to put a watch on what the values are, you can do that. I debugged this in the past and that's why they are still there, but I can remove them easily. And let's say if you want to see z, so you can just put z and the answer is 75. If you want to put x, you can see it's 15. If you want to see y, you can just put in y, the name or the value of the variable, and you can see that. Now that's watch, because it might happen that you have tens and thousands of variables and other functions out there. But if you don't know what to do, there's also something called as a call stack, where you can see the call stack, what happened, how and what was run. You can click on it, it will take you there. You can go up, step out of current, you can step into the next function, whatever you wish to. And if everything works well, you can just say resume and the answer would be 75. Now if you refresh the page or run with JS again, the same thing will happen and you can see the values of these variables. So that's how you can put in a debugger, and the debugger keyword basically stops the execution of JavaScript and calls, if any available, the debugging function. Now this has the same function as setting a breakpoint in the debugger. There is another way of you can have a debugger. Let's say I remove this code. Let's say I do a play. Let's run this. Even then we run, it'll go and stop on the debugger point. If I put another one, it'll go and stop on this one. You can enable or disable the debugger using the click. If I do another click and I run, everything will work fine. You see that? So that's how you can put debuggers or breakpoints into your JavaScript and make sure you can debug the values when you want to see something. All major browsers support debugging tool like Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Opera, Safari, and you can go and easily Google on how to get the console. Once you get the console, you have a lot of information that you can work with. Firefox has a plugin called as a Firebug that you can install that should help you do the debugging. If you have any questions around how to debug, what to debug, feel free to ask me in the Q&A section and I can help you out there.